Hello and welcome to the Secret Agents of Consciousness podcast. My name is Genevieve Faulkner, your host, and if you're watching this on YouTube, hi. So I wanted to do this podcast episode for those of you that are going through either that have gone through a breakup or that are going through one at the moment. So how do you create ease with that? How do you move on from a breakup? So in this reality, one of the things that we're kind of entrained into doing is to create judgment of the other person in order to create a separation so that we can move on. And yet, what if that actually doesn't create the most for you or the other person? The thing is that when you create judgment, you solidify things, which creates walls to receiving. And it creates this place where your point of view basically creates your reality. And so when you see people that have relationships where they, will have a particular relationship and then leave it, and then they'll get into another relationship and it's like they're having the same relationship again. That's usually because of the judgment that they've created about the past relationship that then causes them to kind of pull in somebody that they can act out that similar dynamic with, or they end up doing the opposite and going having so much judgment of that relationship, they don't want to have something similar, and then they kind of pull in someone to act out the opposite dynamic of what the relationship was. So instead of playing the same role in the relationship, they'll play the opposite role. And so how do you move on from a relationship and create greater in your life? So first of all, what if, obviously, depending on what the circumstances are and whether or not you're the person that's kind of decided to leave or whether you're the person that stay behind, things might be a little different. And yet, one thing with breakups is, what if they're actually a kindness? If the relationship doesn't work for both people, it's never going to create greater to stay together. So even though, in the moment, you may feel like it's the worst thing on the planet, you may hate the other person, you may feel like your whole future's been destroyed, what if it's actually a gift? What if, when you do that, because what a lot of people tend to do with relationships is they will shut down possibilities based upon staying in a relationship and creating a future with the person they're with. Often slowly cutting off parts of themselves or not really choosing for themselves a lot of the time. So what if when you end a relationship, it actually creates all sorts of different possibilities for the future? And so what gift is the relationship breaking up or breaking down that you haven't yet acknowledged? If you can kind of get to gratitude for the choice that either you or the other person has made in regards to ending the relationship or changing the relationship, because just because it's a breakup, it doesn't mean that it has to be an ending. If you have a true caring for the person and they have a true caring for you, and both of you are actually willing to function from a place of no judgment and acknowledging, cool, this relationship is done as it is now. What else could you create together? What if you didn't have to destroy everything? What if you could have a friendship? So a breakup doesn't mean that, it has to be a terrible life-destroying event. What if it could just actually be something that begins to create greater for you? Now, the other thing is in order to move on from it, basically, the more you can get to gratitude of everything, the more you don't solidify anything from the relationship, which allows you to then have a greater relationship in the future. So you want to kind of start to look at what are you judging yourself for in the relationship, or what are you judging the other person for? And what is the gift of the relationship you've had? And what is the gift of the person? So depending on what the relationship was like, that may be a little bit of a tricky one. If you were with somebody that was really abusive, you might be there was no gift. What if every single relationship, there is some sort of gift in it? And the gift is usually some awareness you can have. When you go into the judgment, you create that wall, and that limits the receiving of the awareness you can have of what you were trying to kind of like unravel or learn or discover in the relationship. So even if it was a horrible relationship, what if like you were actually kind of like recreating a relationship based upon stuff that you hadn't resolved with like one of your parents? And if you be in the question of, what is the gift of this relationship? Oh, cool, I just repeated this pattern. I must like not know how to receive a loving relationship beyond whatever like way my parents treated me. Cool, that's a great awareness to have. Okay, what would it take for me to actually receive greater than this? So it's that kind of thing. It's really looking at like, what is the gift of the relationship that I had with this person, and what is the gift of this person? So the other thing is you kind of like want to like be in allowance of you for the choices that you've made in the relationship, and not go into like, be willing to be accountable, but not from judgment. So it takes two people to create a relationship, and it takes two people to end a relationship or destroy the relationship. It's never like a one person thing. So you kind of want to like look at like, be willing to look at the kind of good, the bad, and the ugly of yourself, but from the place of like being in allowance of yourself and not judging yourself for whatever you've chosen. So the more you can be in allowance of what you've chosen, the more you'll be able to kind of move on from this and allow yourself to expand and grow beyond the relationship. So one of the other things that you can do to assist yourself is in Access Consciousness, we talk about distractor implants. And distractor implants are a certain set of things that kind of cause you to loop in something that stops you from creating greater in your life. So things like anger, rage, fury, hate, blame, shame, regret, guilt, all of these things, if you kind of like get stuck in them, you'll get so focused on that, and then you won't be looking at what else you can be, what else you can choose, what else you can create. And so one of the things you might like to check out is a book called Living Beyond Distraction by Gary Douglas and Dr. Dane here, which lists all of the distractor implants. But what you can do to help yourself is use the Access Consciousness clearing statement to destroy and uncreate anytime you're functioning from a distractor implant, because distractor implants come up a lot with breakups, because people will either go into often the blame of what kind of has gone wrong, or they'll go into the guilt of making themselves so wrong for the choices that they've made or the choice to leave. And both sides keeps the person in this kind of either place of fight or just like judgment that stops them focusing on the future that they could choose to create. So clearing those like creates so much space, and it also stops you from being able to be controlled by the other person. Because if you have been with someone that has been, unkind, abusive, and functioning from gratitude isn't like the thing that they do, they might be like directing a lot of judgment at you, like for leaving or in order to have left. And so one of the things that can happen in relationship breakdowns also is people go into fighting or defending against the other person's judgment, and then they don't allow themselves to create greater for that reason. And so rather than fighting or defending, what if you didn't have to prove anything about you? What if you could just perceive the judgment and kind of like just be interesting point of view about it? Interesting, they're judging me. And not have to kind of like prove that you are something or that you're not something in order to like make them happy or create peace. So what if it's actually okay to create a life beyond like the relationships that you've had? What if you didn't have to hold yourself back in order to kind of like honor the relationship or the person that you've been with, or create peace? So what if you were willing to always create greater and choose greater for you? And what if that is actually an invitation for the other person to move on and be happy also? So, hopefully that is a contribution to you guys. The other thing you might want to look at is, like, with any relationship, like, you might want to kind of be in question of, like, what would it take for you to have greater, to choose greater, and really focus on, like, caring for you. Because sometimes what people can do is they will break up with someone, and it's like then there's this space in their life, and then they kind of want to fill that space, and they'll, like, get into another relationship really quickly. And is that truly caring and kind for you? So what if you looked at the needs that you'd been functioning from in the relationships that you had, and what if you actually allowed yourself to start to be more of a whole person within you before you choose to create another relationship? So often, as I said, like, people will often create, when relationships don't work, it's because people have given up a lot of themselves in the relationship. And so rather than kind of just jumping into something else, what if you started to reclaim those parts and pieces of you again? So who am I beyond the relationship that I just had? What else could I choose? What if you focused on caring for yourself, on contributing to yourself, on kind of getting to know what you like? Because how much in the relationship that you've had did you make it about the other person? How much did you eliminate the choices that you'd like to kind of, like, make based upon whatever their wants or needs were? So what if you took time to really kind of enjoy discovering what your reality is, and kind of loving you? Because the more you're willing to actually love you and be you and have the intimacy with you, which is the gratitude, the honoring, the allowance, the vulnerability, the trust in you, the greater the relationships can be in the future. So if you would like help getting there, I facilitate some classes called Relationship Done Different, which are amazing for kind of clearing all of the insanity that people do with relationships in this reality, all of the ways that we're entrained into kind of giving up ourselves and judging the other person, and functioning from expectations and projections, rejections, like all of the crazy stuff that we do in relationships that actually destroy the relationship possibilities instead of having the relationship that could create greater. And they also give a set of tools that allows you to create something completely different with relationships. But the classes are really about getting to that place of being vulnerable with you, being honoring, being grateful for you, trusting you, being an allowance of you. So if you would like to go on that journey, I'll leave the link below this podcast or video, so you can check those classes out, because they are amazing. And if there is anything else that you would like me to create a podcast on, do leave a comment. Or if this one has contributed to you, do leave a comment. Thank you. And thanks for listening, guys. See you later.